pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome to the City of Austin's Truth and Taxation meeting for our budget for 2022. Mr. Dankert, it's your show.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks everybody for showing up tonight. I'd like to start off tonight's meeting kind of how we've started off many of the other ones over the last couple of years. A lot of the questions that we've had in the past have been based on valuation. My property value went up 20 or 30%. The purpose of the meeting tonight is not to talk about value increases. That's a discussion between you and the county assessor's office. Now, increases in valuation will certainly drive your taxes up, your tax payment up. But again, if you're here and you want to discuss why the value of your property went up, we're going to have to refer you to the county assessor's office for that discussion. So here we are. This is required by law for 2022 taxes and the levy for us to have a discussion with the citizens to show them or talk to them about where their tax dollar is going in the next year. For 2022, our total budget is $38,949,000, just under $38,950,000. What this does for us is should maintain our AA2 credit rating. Revenues for 2022, besides our tax levy, our biggest dollar amount, our biggest revenue source is from the state of Minnesota and what's called local government aid. For 2022, we're scheduled to get $8,755,992 of additional aid. That aid helps us keep the tax levy down lower. We use those dollars to help pay for police, fire, operational costs of the city of Austin. There's good news and bad news with LGA. Good news is we get it. The bad news is it's about 45% of our general operating budget. So in years when the state of Minnesota has had some financial issues, they've actually cut our LGA. We had, I think, it was over $1 million cut one year. That is a huge cut or reduction to the city of Austin, for which we then are forced to balance our operations and make different choices as a council or as the elected officials. So we are always watching the state budget. Now the good news is state budget appears to have a surplus of over $7 billion for next year at the state. Will that translate into additional state aid for the city of Austin? That's soon to be, or will be figured out, I guess, when they come into session at the end of January of 2022. Property tax revenue scheduled for next year. The 2022 proposed budget has a tax levy proposed of $7,940,000. That's up from the $7,436,000 that we had for payable 2021. It is a 6.78% increase in the tax levy. But again, as you look at your individual tax statements, that number could go up or down based on your value change. So if your value of your property went up 20%, your tax increase on the city's line will be higher than 6.78%. I have some sample tax statements I actually received from the county where there was no increase in valuation. Some neighborhoods didn't have valuation increases. Some commercial property didn't. On those statements, we actually see a tax decrease for payable 2022. Theirs stayed the same. Everybody else's went up higher than 6.78%, results in a lower tax payment for individuals that did not see a valuation increase in their property. Now, unfortunately, I see a lot of the tax statements I have seen have valuation increases. Expenditures for 2022, salaries and benefits drive most of the city costs. For payable 2022, we're proposing to increase our full-time equivalents back to where they were in 2020. For 2021, we eliminated 4 positions. For payable 2022, we're proposing to bring those back. I think the mayor's comments during our budget discussions were, I want a functioning city, and this is what we need to do to get those. A lot of the increase, the city went through a comp and class study back in 2019, 2020 that's been implemented. We still have many employees within a step system that are adding to the additional costs. For 2022, we have 112,000 set aside in contingency. That's your, hey, something comes up, we need to find some extra dollars to cover some costs. That's what we have set aside in that fund. Usually it's about 150 grand, but again, council's direction to get the tax levy down to the 7,940,000, we had to make some sacrifices there. In addition, in that levy, 7,940,000, 1.4 million of that helps cover our infrastructure, our street costs, our trail costs, LED lights, sidewalk program. So those are more invested in the capital projects. In addition, we get about $1 million to $1.2 million or $1.3 million of state gas tax money for street projects that will go out in addition. About 700 grand is in the general fund tax levy to help pay for police cars, park equipment, you name it, things that benefit the general public are needed by the department heads. Wastewater treatment plant is part of our enterprise funds. These aren't directly tax related. You pay that every month on your utility bill. We're in the midst of what will be an $80 million treatment plant redo in the next couple years, and the rates are scheduled to increase in the treatment plant for a couple years in order to help cover the cost of that upgrade. Fund balance wise, we try to maintain 42 to 48% of our expenses in fund balance. That's our rainy day fund in essence. We don't get our state aid payment till July and December. We don't get our tax payment till July and December. So that means of the fiscal year ended December 31st, January through June, we don't have a whole lot of cash coming in. That's why we need the fund balance in order to cover operations until we do get those checks. That's why we have fund balance at that 42 to 48%. So with that being said, I'd like to go into the PowerPoint presentation that I handed out. Everybody should have a copy of that. So here's our 2022 budget. I do have extras, so each can have one. When do we start our budget? Well, this year we started the discussion on May 17th. So roughly 6-7 months ago, we actually started this discussion with the elected officials to determine what are your goals, what are your thoughts for the upcoming budget year. June 7th, work session to discuss parameters. June 18th, budget documents were then sent to staff for them to start their internal process. August 28th, they gave them about a month. August 23rd, I'm sorry, we gave them about a month. The initial balanced budget was brought to council. September 7th, council debated the pros and cons, what they're willing to do for a tax levy, which then ended up on September 20th, council's meeting, actual council meeting where we had to set a preliminary tax levy and budget. After that date, the tax levy cannot be increased. It can be decreased, it just cannot be increased, because that's what shows up on your tax statements. You need to know what your max is going to pay. We can increase the budget, we just can't use taxes to pay for it. October, November, council does some fine tuning as far as what are your thoughts on things that have come up or tax levy questions, which will culminate with tonight's meeting required by law, and then an actual resolution approved by council at the December 20th meeting to approve the tax rate, the tax levy and budget. That is then sent to the county and to the state of Minnesota, for which then we're in compliance with the state's truth and taxation laws, and then the county can then spread our levy next year and start collecting the taxes. If you have any questions as we go, please fire away too.
Is that December 20 meeting open to the public?
Yes, it's a regular city council meeting. Yep, so it is open to the public, just like anything. It's just one of the items on the agenda. Again, one of the goals for next year, functioning city, get that tax increase as low as possible. And we want to make sure we're creating a long-term roadmap. We don't want to, our thoughts or our goals have always been, let's make sure that we're not putting us too far behind for future councils. The council could have said, hey, let's do a 0% tax levy increase this year. Make it look great. Well, but next year then, and the next year we got to go 18% or 20% to catch up. Council's goals, the ones I've been at, hey, we just need to make sure we keep going on a level playing field here and not burdening future councils with massive, large decisions. Our estimated tax increase because of the comp and class implementation, which was the employee wages, actually increased estimated cost about $1.1 million. That equates to a 15% tax increase, not 6.78. Questions were asked by council. What do we want to do? How do we want to handle tree trimming, which for this year, 2021, was the first year we contracted it out. Do we want to go back to in-house tree trimmers? We have staff vacancies that have been unfilled. Energy efficiencies. We have affordable housing and daycare issues. How are we going to handle those? The result is staff and department heads and council went to work to try to get that tax increase down from 15% to something lower and still provide for the citizens, something for them to be able to use throughout the year. End result tonight, proposed tax levy for 2022 is broken down into primarily 4 major areas. The general fund, which handles the payments for police, fire, parks and rec, administration, and plowing the streets. $5.4 million of that tax levy is going to that fund. Our Port Authority, which is our economic development arm, is scheduled to get $50,000 of the tax levy. That entity works with things like New Tech. The New Tech development is going to add 35 to 40 jobs in our Creekside Business Park. They use those dollars to help fund operations to get entities like New Tech to come to town. They're also in charge of the stencil project, the apartment complex at the YMCA. Library fund is getting just over $1,050,000 for their operations so that individuals can access the library free of charge. And then the capital improvement revolving fund, $1.4 million. Again, this is our dollars set aside to help cover our share of road costs. We spend millions of dollars each year improving roads, 3 or 4 roads a year, quite frankly. So again, we're trying to keep doing a little portion each year so we don't fall further and further behind. Adding these up, it's $7,940,000. So you write your check to Moore County twice a year for your taxes, and then they distribute the taxes to mainly the 3 taxing entities. City of Austin, based on 2021, gets about 41 cents of every dollar you pay the county. 36% is retained by the county. 21% goes to the school, and the other 2% is the watershed districts, HRAs, those sort of things. Here's our employees by department. In red on the right-hand column, it should say 2022 proposed. Again, we're increasing our positions by a net 4. Administrative assistant will be up 1. Library staff will go back up 1. Sign shop's getting their person back. The nature center is getting their person back. And then the tree trimmers will be added back, that we're going to do our own tree trimming again, but they will come out of the park maintenance department. So it'll be a net 0 shift there.
So your tree trimmers are going up by 2, and did you also say you were outsourcing as well?
We tried outsourcing this year. We're not going to outsource next year. So we'd move those into the park maintenance department, outsourced, decided no, we're going to bring them back, but that means there's less people mowing grass in the parks.
Tom, do we have tracking set up for that? Because I think the analysis was if we're due 535 trees or more internally, it's a good return for the taxpayer. Do we have tracking set up for that?
The Park and Rec Department will have to track that like they've done in the past as to how many trees, trees in the parks versus trees in the boulevards, how many stump removals, and we track their hours and their time on our payroll time sheets. So we'll be able to tell how much is actually spent on tree trimming. Because you look at a tree trimmer, they're not tree trimming 40 hours a week. They might be trimming trees 3 or 4 days a week. Then they're out helping mow the grass, or they're out working on a pavilion in the park system. So when we say tree trimmers, the myth is that's all they do is tree trimming, but in reality it isn't. They'll jump on a snow plow if we have a winter emergency. So yes, we can track what they're doing and how many trees. It'll be up to the Park and Rec Director, Kevin Nelson, and his staff to then give us the statistics as to what they accomplished or what they didn't accomplish. Good news is now we've set a goal. We know what that break-even number, we believe we know what that break-even number is. And we'll see if they can beat that or exceed it. Payroll costs for the city of Austin. We're a major employer in town. It's kind of hard to see, but for all the departments with salaries and benefits, about $16.4 million is in the budget for next year for paying of employees and the benefits. We have a PERA system, state of Minnesota mandated involvement for all our employees for retirement. The state sets the rates for those, for police and fire and regular employees. We have roughly $650,000 set aside for temporary help. We have a lot of temporary help running our park and rec programs and supplementing our staff during the year. In addition to that, PERA is about $1.3 million. We have pay FICA, PERA, et cetera. You look at our general fund, $12.5 million is salary and benefits on a $19.4 million budget. 64% of our cost is in the general fund are people. Police, fire, plow drivers, administration. Library, 67%. People are heavy in the cost of how and what we do with business. Where's our money coming from for next year? Well, just over 38.9 million. 26% is intergovernmental revenue, $10.1 million. That's mainly the $8.7 million of local government aid. In addition to that, there's some other fire and police state aid we get, but primarily that's the state of Minnesota's LGA check. Enterprise fund revenue, 23%. That's primarily, there's a toilet there, that's your sewer charge. That's primarily where all the money comes in when you pay your utility bill. The utility sends us the sewer payment.
So the one governmental source is state. Is there any federal?
We get very little federal dollars. Historically, it's only been for flood projects, except for the CARES Act and the ARPA money that we did get money for. Otherwise, federally, the only grants we historically get are flood grant related.
Okay. Are there any other grants obtainable through the federal operation?
Craig City Administrator Clark has actually done several, I think, attempts at trying to get federal dollars to help with our treatment plant, but I'll let, maybe Craig talk on that.
Right, yeah, we asked with the congressionally directed spending that was going on, we got in touch with Senator Klobuchar, and unfortunately our efforts weren't successful.
On that front. There's other grants that do come up, some EDA grants we've applied for, et cetera, and it's just kind of a task. Yep. Other revenue, $6.3 million. We get a payment in lieu of tax from the Austin utilities. We get contributions, tax increments, et cetera. Kind of needed to lump them into something. And then finally, internal service fund revenue. We set aside dollars in our budget each year so that the replacement of fire trucks, dump trucks, et cetera, the money is set aside ahead of time. So that internal service fund revenue is actually coming from other departments to pool money aside so we have dollars to buy when those depreciation schedules or when those vehicles need replacements. For example, we have in 2023 or 24, we have about a $1.9 million fire truck that we need to replace. So instead of trying to levy all that money the year before to get it, we try to levy a little bit each year so we have the dollars set aside and not have to have massive increases in the levy to pay for certain items. Expenditure-wise, the general library and recreation program funds, about $2.4 million goes to council, mayor, administration, finance, HR, and city hall costs. Public safety, which is primarily police, fire, and building and rental inspections that are about just under $8.4 million of our costs. Street and highways, just over $4 million. And park and rec in the library, about just under $4.8 million in costs to perform those services for our citizens. And again, most of the library and park and rec items are free of charge for the citizens. It's one of our charges under the charter to provide those services for our citizens. We often talk about the arena. Arena probably gets revenue equal 50% of the expenditures. Same with our pool. If we had to charge really what the actual cost is of that, we'd be driving hockey teams out of our community, and might be hard for individuals to afford going to the pool. So again, that's where the tax levy and state aid comes in to try to help keep those costs lower to the ultimate users.
I do have a question or comment about Parks and Rec, if I may. I have about a 12.8% increase on my property taxes. When I first moved into the home I have in southeast Austin, I was paying, I don't know, about $615 of house payment, and the main things that have gone up are taxes and insurance. I'm now paying about $730. And that's probably great compared to but it's still an increase. And I'm great with the increase as long as something's not being taken away. I don't know when this park ordinance 382 got passed, but not everyone's aware of that on the east side lake. I've talked to business owners that aren't aware. And that basically penalizes people for walking dogs, for, I guess there's other things, no camping, no glass, any of which can incur a $750 fine. I don't know if that's being enforced. The chief of police isn't here, I guess.
Mm-mm.
So, but obviously I'm not going to walk my dogs at your city parks. I'm going to find somewhere else. So why would what am I getting for the Parks and Rec then?
Well, that's, you could go to the dog park, but that brings up an interesting conversation. I think I've told council about this. Well, a couple of years ago, 3 elderly ladies from the condos out by Walmart showed up to the office. And I don't get many visitors, so, they said, hey, we want to talk about our taxes. Come on in, And I sat the 3 down. And we started talking about taxes and increases and valuations, and the one lady on the left says, well, we need to cut taxes. So I said, all right, what would you decide? We have to cut our costs. What would you decide you think we should cut? And I think her comment was, we can cut the library. Nobody reads books anymore, and it's a waste of money. The lady in chair number 3 looked at her and said, are you crazy? I go to the library. I still read books. My grandkids use it. You can't do it. Lady then, I looked at her and said, well, what do you think? Close the arenas. I don't use the arenas. What did this lady say? My grandkids skate. Are you nuts? We can't do that. This is, what I have to pay to my taxes so that my grandkids can skate. I'm okay with that. You know what the lady in the middle did? Time to go. She says, I can see the problem. You can never make everybody happy. It's kind of a balancing game to see what can you do for the satisfaction of most of the citizens. You'll never get everybody on the same page.
No, but I believe a minority of the citizens got that 382 passed, in my opinion. I get almost strafed by bicycle riders when I did attend that park.
Probably 20,
It's
30 years.
Not aware of the 380.
I'm
not
not
sure.
familiar with
Maybe
it.
20,
So.
30 years ago that we put that.
Eric,
that
you got
was
some
passed.
history on that?
The signs haven't been up 20 or 30. I've got signs.
We'll have to look into that.
Well, the camp, as far as camping and dogs, I mean, they've never been
Never been
allowed
allowed.
in the parks, so, I mean, you can take them on the trails, but not in the parks, but.
Well, people do take them on other trails that I guess aren't related to the city. I've seen some taken both in the city parks and on the Hormel Park, I guess it's near the.
It might
That was kind of the reason we opened the dog park too, was to,
It may not be allowed, but again, the police gonna stop you for that. That's, I guess, a judgment call on their end, how much they're enforcing it. There's not supposed to be glass bottles. There's not supposed to be dogs at Todd Park. I've seen them there. I'll be honest with you. I've seen them there.
Right.
And that's been a discussion of council over the years too. Ordinances we have, can we enforce them? And we used to have the rummage sale ordinance that was driving the police officers crazy. Until we said, these are only 2 places you can put them.
put signs there.
Now, the signs are fairly recent, at least on East Side Park.
So we could certainly put you in,
Where the dog park is, actually.
We could-
My dogs probably aren't that sociable anyway, so it's probably better I don't go. But that's one complaint I have. The other complaint I have is in the public safety arena.
okay,
I know you have you know, a homeless shelter downtown, but what is being done to help?
We don't have a homeless shelter.
Okay.
We don't have a homeless shelter.
Sorry, maybe it's,
We have the Salvation Army where people can go to get, food and that, yep.
so how do our tax dollars help the homeless, if any?
I guess I would say to that, we have about 5 documented homeless that are significantly homeless, and it's really the human services role of county services that falls under, but the Austin Police Department has taken these folks to a facility, to a hotel, to somewhere where there's some shelter and giving them that, as well as giving the resources to the county, as well as social workers checking on a guy living in a van a couple days a week last month, and they do their best to help them. A lot of it with the homeless we're discovering is it's really just a cultural thing. They prefer to be outside. As much as we give them shelter and say, here, it doesn't cost you anything to stay here, they're back on the streets, whether it's addiction or whether it's other issues they may have, but it's a complex issue. Our law enforcement does a great job of trying to get them where they need to be safe. And oftentimes we're pushing water uphill because they prefer to be outside.
I think on the park and rec piece of it, I think the ordinance, I'm just looking at it here, yeah, I mean, that's gotta be a 30-plus year ordinance, and some of it makes sense. I don't think it's real stringently enforced. I mean, I think if you've got your dog running around in a park and you're not cleaning up after it and it's barking at people, it's probably, but, I mean, I can't sit up here and tell you that I've never taken my dog to a city park. You didn't write that down though, right, Eric?
Well, yeah, I would have even said anything if they said, pick up after your pet or whatever. I do that most of the time anyway, but this says no animals.
Most
at
of the
all,
time.
So that's why it caught my eye. And so did the $750.
You said you pick up after your dog most of the time, huh?
Yes.
You don't want to give us your name.
My yard, I don't.
Name and address.
But anyway, that's,
You can always propose ordinance changes. I have Rebecca's on the Park and Rec Board, Jeff was on the Park and Rec Board, and Kevin Nelson's our director. Can certainly get you in contact with him. Do you have discussions with them and see where it goes? Again, like Jason says, probably a 30-plus-year-old ordinance. We try to go through a lot of the ordinances and get them updated, but maybe there are some antiquated ones that we need to remove some language on. Getting dogs allowed in all the parks unleashed, I think it's gonna be an uphill battle. That's just me, but
obviously, but anyway, thanks.
Yep. General expenditures, general fund, library, recreation programs continued. We spend about $300,000 on what we consider business development, which is the hotel motel tax rebate that goes to the Convention Bureau for business purposes. We pay the DCA some dollars each year for economic development. Again, $700,000 for capital outlay, police, parks, administration costs. Again, we're trying to replace 2, 3, 4 police vehicles every year. We get lots of miles on them. Transfers this year, $78,000 going into the airport construction fund for part of our airport construction costs. Then again, $124,000. We've got about $112,000 is contingency. The other $12,500 is for mosquito spraying if needed. Again, if it's, no, go ahead.
Did I see like earlier that you spent the $8,300,000 that was going towards public safety? What is the difference between that and capital outlay again?
We tried to keep capital outlay in its own set of accounts. Many years ago before I was here, each department had their own capital outlay. Well, whether they used it or not was the million-dollar question. It seemed like 30 years ago it used to be, well, if I need it, I've got money set aside that I can get something. If I don't need it, great. Well, that was impacting the tax levy. We're taxing citizens for it every year. Yeah, we didn't really have a firm list 30 years ago what we were buying. So we changed it such that here's a list of capital outlay councils approved. Department heads, that's what you're approved to buy. So it's not like, hey, I've got a police car budget, but I want to go buy a drone. Pardon?
What are the kind of things that go on that kind of list?
Capital outlay for next year would consist of, let me get to that.
Vehicles is the big thing.
Pardon?
Vehicles is a big thing. Computer equipment.
Engineering is going to have a GPS rover to help out in their engineering sites when they're doing roads. I got a Ford hybrid for the police department. I got about $200,000, $200,000 to $300,000 of police equipment, including pickup trucks, CSO vehicle, unmarked vehicle, don't put that in the paper there, computers. Park and Rec has about 200 grand of ADA walkways, repairing pavilions, fixing pavilions. Todd Park's concession stand coolers and freezers are shot. And then the paths that go through the parks, we have to annually tar them, or whatever they call that black stuff they put on them.
Maintain.
So they just do different kind of places in town to make their requests to you, I guess, I'm not sure how that like works.
Pardon, how,
Do
explain?
they just like kind of like make requests for that kind of stuff?
Yep. They'll make all the requests, and then we'll plot them down. Well, how much, we try to spend about 700 grand a year on those type things. So we try to keep it within a budget. What we don't want to do or haven't done in the past is, well, we need to lower the tax levy, let's just, we don't need all this equipment, we don't need to replace the roof or the carpet. And my philosophy has been here the 25 years, that's the first thing that stays. Okay, we've had to replace many roofs. The library's gonna be due for a new roof in a couple of years. We're doing it in 3 different sections. But we've always tried to set aside dollars so we have equipment for the individuals or the employees to work with.
And Tom, like the difference is, if I understand it correctly too, is like public safety, a lot of that's salaries, pension
Operating
type of
costs,
stuff, whereas
operating
the
costs.
capital outlay is, like the police car is capital outlay. The police
Exactly.
officer to go in the car is the.
Correct, yep. And this way, we keep it individually listed as capital outlay, we can track what's actually being bought. Because at the end of each year, if they, for some reason, haven't bought anything, they can ask to carry that money over the next year, and we can easily see, well, yeah, you were approved for a truck, why didn't you buy it? We can't get them, there's none out there. We ordered it 6 months ago, but it's taking that long to get it. So it's easier for us to track what his council said you can buy versus what you're actually buying.
And I just would like to note, because this is my first year on the council, so it's my first year going through budget stuff, I was really impressed with things like capital outlay. We actually, when we do this process, there's a 5-year window that we're looking at. So we're only approving this year, but we can see the $1.9 million fire truck coming 4 years down the road, and we can see kind of how some of the departments stagger things. So this year might be the big ticket item, and the next 2 are smaller, so that the total for the city is roughly the same each year based on kind of what we think we can do. So that's really helpful for me. The other thing, you'll probably talk about this, Tom, but since she was asking about the 8 million versus the 700,000, remind us again, what percentage of the city budget is just basically salary?
Well, in the general fund, 64% of our $19 million budget are people costs.
Okay.
That's full-time, part-time.
Yep.
Health insurance, wages, benefits associated with that.
Yeah, so essentially 2/3 of the tax money goes strictly for salaries.
And, right, and those are through, we've got roughly 143 employees budgeted for next year, probably 135 are bargaining unit covered. We got 8 bargaining units that cover 95% of our employees, so we have to follow whatever is in that contract for wages and benefits. Now, all those contracts expire at the end of 2022, so during 2022, staff will be negotiating new contracts, which then will affect future tax levies, costs, et cetera.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
What has been speaking of persons employed by the city, what has been the average annual salary increase and wage increase?
The 3-year contract that's ending in 2022 is 2%, 2%, 2%. But we went through a comp and class study a couple years ago that also has steps of 5% for some employees that were not at the top of the pay schedule. So for some people, it's a 7% increase if you weren't making the top salary. For the rest, it's 2%.
Shouldn't it be a little more than 2%?
Well, I don't want you on my side for negotiations, but that's up for the negotiations.
That because, I mean, here, your tax levy graphic back in 2013 is 4.1.
Yep.
We're at 7.9 million in 2022, so it's nearly double.
Yep.
If you look at the LGA one that's gone, if you look, I think it's the page above that or below where it shows how much local government aid, which is the state money, you'll see that has gone up at a much slower rate. And that is roughly 50% of our budget. So if that goes up slower, unfortunately, our increases have to go up more.
One time, if I could, like with the comp and class, like the total dollars we spent went up, what, like 15-20% total? Obviously, how that breaks down on a per year basis, on a per person basis is different based on steps and lanes, but like our total dollars, how much did that go up? Like
Seems to
15?
me, when everybody hits the top of the pay plan, the average increase was closer to 35%.
Okay. So I think that's where
Yep.
you take 35 divided by 3 and it gets to much higher than 2, which drives a lot of that tax levy piece of it, right?
And Mr. Postman brings up a great point. Many, many, many years ago, we had 7 or 8 straight years where we didn't increase the tax levy 1 nickel. That was council's goal. We didn't have to because this thing called LGA, the increases the state was giving us was enough to cover salary increases. Well, if the state's gonna give us money to cover it, there's no need to tax our citizens to get even more because we're spending what we need to spend, so.
I'm probably harping too much on percentage
No, that's okay.
increases. And I have no idea, whether people's taxes have increased 12%.
Right.
But I don't know how long you guys have been on with the city. I was on with a job in Rochester for about 9 years. They decided to downsize my position. So now
At the city?
no,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry,
Okay.
in a private
Okay,
company.
okay, yeah.
So we have an inflationary environment going on right now with stuff like gas, for instance. I'm laid off. I'm trying to start my own business and look for full-time and part-time positions. So yeah, the increase, everything is noticed, obviously.
Right.
And then, yeah, when I feel like I have to find another park, but I just feel like everything's closing.
We've had many discussions, even internally. The city uses a lot of gas fuel ourselves. Price of oil with all the asphalt and the street projects we do. The cost of labor. I think Craig's had a couple employees in on the health insurance side with the city employees have to pay for health insurance. Inflation's at 5, depending on who you talk to, 5.4 to 5.9%.
Right.
In Minneapolis, the Tribune, I see public works employees have turned down contracts of 3, 3, and 3, or whatever they were in those ranges. Something's got to give here. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on any one
Oh,
person.
no,
I'm
yeah,
just trying to say we're in an inflationary environment. Y'all can expect everything to get looked
Right.
at closer. And whether you combat it with your levies or with finding federal or state grants to help funding, I feel like everything needs to be looked at.
And department heads do a lot of grant writing or finding themselves. A lot of the problems with the grants and the state and feds grants that we look at are capital related. This is why we're trying to get help with our $80 million treatment plant. There's been some grants through the Office of Justice Programs for police officers. Hey, we'll give you 3 years of funding for a new officer. Hey, but you got to agree to keep them on after that for 5 years, whatever it might be. So those are long-term decisions that council has to look at. Is it worth those sort of things to commit to that?
Is our water safer with the lakes around here?
That's an Austin Utilities question. They're a separate entity. They handle the water, sewer, the water, gas, and electric. I would say they're their own elected officials. They're merged into our annual report, but they're their own board of directors, sets their own rates and operations.
Okay.
Other expenditures, tax increment districts spend about $325,000. These are, we'll get into that further. Enterprise funds, which is again your sewer bill, waste transfer station, stormwater utility, and port authority. Internal service funds, again, 5.7 million. Those are internal dollars we pool up so we have money, for example, to buy a fire truck when it comes due. And capital revolving funds, those are street projects, including trails, LED lighting. What's happened to the tax levy over the last 10 years? That's the chart that this gentleman's been looking at. They've been increasing. This LGA has not kept up. We've had to increase the tax levy. Over the last 10 years, you can see there's only been 1 year it actually decreased, 2014. I think it decreased, if I recall, because of a state mandated levy limit. The state said, you can't raise taxes anymore. They said that to everybody in the state, not just City of Austin. So there's a history of what's happened over the last, since 2013. Now, tax levy versus valuation, a new chart we've put in here from prior years. You can see in red the value, this comes from Moore County, has increased, but as the value increases, our tax levy has also increased. So the goal has always been, you know, you want to try to keep it at that same level, same rate, whether it's going up or down. An interesting, more interesting number to us finance people is the tax rate. This is, in essence, through 2021, the taxes you pay per 1,000 valuation of your home. So our tax levy might be going up, but if you look at 2021, the actual rate you pay per $100,000 actually went down. So that means on your tax basis, you actually paid less in taxes on your home per $1,000 of valuation than you did the prior year. A lot of that could be new growth. Hey, we got new homes being built, new businesses, you added on to your garage or whatever it might be, so the assessor captured more value.
Tom, do we have an estimate on that for 22 based on the budget, or do we have to wait for information from the county to
We'll have
get
to wait for
that?
information from the county, but I can tell you based on tax statements that I've seen that had little or no increase in their value, we actually saw those taxes decrease 1.77%. So I'm fully expecting that this tax rate, because of the massive valuation increases, will probably drop to 52, 53, something like that. But when your market value went way up, it's still, like this gentleman said, it's the ultimate dollar. I want to know what I'm paying. I don't care about the tax rate. But this is just a calculation we can use to see how is our tax rate going based on the values in the community.
Right.
So how do we compare to other cities? Well, here's the tax rate in other cities. Comparable cities around us. Winona, 42, Faribault, 52.5, Austin, 54.24, Owatonna, 59.5, and Elberly, 60.3. What this chart says, that the taxes you pay if you want to open your new business, you're probably best off going to Winona for taxes only. You probably want to stay away from Albert Lee. Austin, firmly planted in the middle. So now we get to kind of a breakdown of the individual funds. General fund expenditures. Here's where your money's going. Police, public safety, we kind of talked about them earlier. Special revenue fund, we have some minor funds that aren't tax supported. Recreation programs fund helps youth basketball, youth wrestling. It's a user base, so no tax dollars go in or out of it. Library fund is about $1.2 million budget. Again, there are tax dollars going into there, but that gives you free access to the library. We have a fire PERA fund, an old retirement fund with about $250,000 left in it. Fire chief has no planned expenditures next year. Historically, we use that to replenish our SCBA's, the breathing apparatus, and other equipment, minor equipment within the fire department. Tax increment debt service, these are parcels that have specific different tax rules than you and I have to live on. Tax increment basically says the city gets to keep all the taxes, city, county, school, and we use them to encourage development. So right now about 25 grand goes back to the city to repay for infrastructure put out to get to CRC's new facility out there several years ago. Murphy's Creek Townhomes, they built out there with the agreement that we'd give them some of their taxes back. The Hy-Vee facility at the old Oak Park Mall site, between the developer rebate and repaying the city's infrastructure costs, gets about 173 grand. And Fox Point and some other smaller developments have about 78 grand going back to them for development on their projects. Once these districts expire, after everybody's costs get paid back, they jump back on the taxes as market value and they pay everybody's city, county, school taxes as if they always had been that way.
Are these almost like incentives just to develop in Austin?
Exactly what they are. CRC was looking at, they were out in the Kruger truck building outside of the city limits, and they were looking at Wisconsin, and I think even Tennessee at the time. So the city, you know, let's give you a little incentive to move into town. We talked to the school district, how many kids are in families work at CRC, the kids go there, school. You lose $8,000 per pupil unit if they move to Tennessee. They're like, yeah, we will support this district.
And Tom, those generally pay back over time, right?
Most districts are 25-year maximums. We usually get them paid back within 20 years because the taxes they pay are usually always higher than they first estimated. Capital Improvements Fund, again, this is where $1.4 million your tax levy is going next year. Street projects are $1.3 million of that. We have the Ramsey Dam transfer in there from Hormel, $750,000. No cost to the taxpayer. Hormel is going to fix it up and then donate it back to us. I think we've kind of been planning on that for a couple of years. But again, those are some of the projects that are being funded out of your tax levy next year. Enterprise Fund, Stormwater Utility District, you pay this bill each month with your utility bill. It's a kind of a MPCA mandate that you gotta clean the water that goes out of town. We have one person kind of dedicated to that, but then we have other capital projects we have to do to ensure that the water is cleaner going into the rivers than when it came into town. Think of runoff of a parking lot, those sort of things, those sort of costs. We gotta make sure that the salt, as much salt as we can, is not being diverted down to the sewer system.
Does that translate to having the requirement to have a sump pump, for instance?
The sump pump is part of the stormwater utility district's problem, yep. Take it you've been inspected.
Yes, I paid $1,600 for a sump.
New sump pump. Sewer user fund, again, this comes on your monthly utility bill. Part of this is paid by Hormel as part of the industrial plant, the industrial waste that they send our way. The rest is paid by the citizens and the other businesses. Then the waste transfer station, we release that to waste management. You can go out and dump your junk out there for $25, whatever it might be. This handles the revenue coming in, and then those dollars are basically set aside for capital improvements, new scales, new buildings, et cetera, concrete out to the facility. Again, no taxpayer dollars go into it because we have the rental agreement with Waste Management to take care of it. Port Authority is our economic development arm, made up of 7-member board, 2 of which are council members. Craig Clark is the executive director, city administrator. We own the Walker Building out by Todd Park that we lease to International Paper. We technically own the Phase 2 addition to the Hormel Institute building. Only because we got state bonding that has to come to a government, so we use the state bonding to help build the facility. We own it on paper, but we don't have to pay any of the bills or get any revenue off of it. In addition to that, the Port Authority owns several parcels around town that we try to buy, develop, sell, to help encourage economic development within the community. So if you're looking for a new plot of land for your business, we got some for you. We have about $25 million in assets under management of the Port Authority, and the total budget operations for next year is just under $1 million. I'm gonna be honest with you, most of that, about $750,000, is just depreciation expense on the Hormel Institute building. So it's not like we're spending cash, it's just us accounting gurus and the dollars we have to move around for odd purposes. Getting near the end here, internal service funds, again, are dollars set aside for dump trucks, fire trucks, you name it. $2.5 million budget in the central garage. About $500,000 of that, or $793,000 of that will go towards dump trucks, pickup trucks, those sort of things. The rest, we have a couple of mechanics out there that cover the operating costs. MIS administration is our one computer guy that handles all the computers at the city of Austin. We are scheduled for a new server next year. Historically, servers are 3 to 4 years. We're like 6 to 7 years out. We try to maximize those usage of those, and knock on wood, have been very successful at that replacement rate. Fire fleet replacement, budget's about $588,000 next year. There is a $470,000 truck scheduled to be purchased. Not the big one, but that'll be coming in another couple of years. And again, they look at depreciation schedules and actual usage of the vehicle and the equipment maintenance logs, records on them to determine, hey, if it says we should last 10 years, you know, a lot of times in our pickup trucks, we'll get 12 years out of them versus the 8 depreciation schedule. Now, they might have some rust on them, but as a citizen, do you want nice looking trucks, or do you want to pay, give me another couple $100,000 to get brand new trucks every year? We've decided rust is okay on some. And finally, the risk management fund, about $2.3 million. That's again funds that are pooled from other departments to pay for health insurance, workers' comp insurance, our sick leave program. When you retire, you get sick leave dollars paid out. We pool the dollars there to ensure we have adequate cash for those. So, in summary, where is the city spending your money?
I mean, the AV's gone up substantially this year.
Yeah, this is quite a presentation. I'm impressed.
Wages and benefits, 16.4. Supplies, $1.6 million. Utilities and professional services, 4.8. Depreciation, which again isn't really cash out, and repairs and maintenance, 6.2. Overall capital outlay, just over 5 million. And transfers, source of fund balance, TIF payments, about 4.8 million. Again, a lot of that 4.8 is source of fund balance in the treatment plant, because we got an $80 million project coming up. So what do you get? I think the average home was valued at 130 grand last we checked, which probably creates about a $640 tax payment. What do you get for that? 24-hour police coverage, 24-hour fire coverage, you get free access to the library, the nature center, 28 parks, pavilions. You get well-maintained streets, access to the arenas and the pool, trails, a functioning wastewater treatment plant, clean stormwater, well-run, nonpartisan elections, economic development, prosecuting attorneys to keep bad guys off. But in the end, it's up to you guys to decide, are you getting a fair value for your dollar? That's what it comes down to, and that's what everybody gets elected for up here, is partially based on, are you using their tax dollar correctly? This is the guidance and the direction council has given us for next year, and which is what we've presented to next year's budget and tax levy. Team, there's the mayor. Phone number, Craig Clark. My phone number. And then I couldn't get rid of that fourth box, so I just put somebody else in there.
You look good there, Tom.
I didn't know how to do it. Yeah, you like that, huh?
Which Bush was president when Craig's picture was taken?
Senior picture. That's his high school senior picture.
So, yeah, in conclusion, there's where your tax dollars are proposed to be going. I did have in the presentation some sample tax statements. I don't know if council wants to try to take a look at those. But again, the big driver that what we've seen on a lot of these has been based on the valuation increases. So if you had, here's some statements Moore County sent over to us. As you can see in the top right corner, valuation in 2021, my thing went dead, otherwise I'd 247,021, the value went up a little bit to 250 grand as a commercial property. What did the taxes do? Overall, they went down 0.2%. On the city side, it went from 2282 to 2267. So on houses, commercial properties, whatever it might be, that had no valuation increases or very little, we'll see a tax reduction. Why is that? Entities or people that had 20, 30% increases are going to be paying more of that tax load. Now somebody's going to ask, well, why did my value go up 30%? It's all based on the assessor. Moore County Assessor's job is to take care of that. And there's a statute that says if your house is sold on an aggregate basis between 90 and 105% of the assessed valuation, then the county's valuations are good enough for the state. But if it's above that or below that, the county has to make adjustments to similar type homes. So let's say your house is valued at $100,000 on the assessor's site, and you sell it for 105. State says good enough, close enough. And again, this is an aggregate, it's just not home by home by home. But let's say your home's valued at 100, and you sell it for 135, which these days is very possible in Moore County because there are no homes for sale. They're selling within days, minutes, quite frankly. So people are getting more than what's the assessed valuation. Well, now you sold your house for 135% above what the assessor valued at. The state of Minnesota says, ding, ding, no, you can't do that. County, you're not valuing that property adequately. You need to increase the value. So because of the lack of homes in Moore County that are for sale and them selling quickly, it's driving the value of everybody's home up, most everybody's home up. That's part of the problem. If we had more homes for sale, took longer to sell, and people were no longer getting premiums on their houses, you wouldn't see valuation increases like that. But at this point in time, with not many homes for sale, you're seeing valuation increase. And even people I've talked to, their value went up 30%. Okay, would you sell your house for that? What's the value of that? No, no way. I got to find another house, and I can't replace my house for that. So it's a problem we've never had in Austin. It always was in the metro area. 20 years ago, you didn't see valuation increase more than a couple % here and there because homes were on the market for 4 months and people were buying them for less than being asked for. It doesn't exist anymore in Moore County. That's all I have, council. We have some proposed resolutions in the back that we'll need council to actually approve at the December 20th meeting. Where did it go? The first one would be to set the tax levy, which is at $7,940,000. The second one would be to set the budget for next year of $38,949,960. And then the third one would be to cancel taxes. We actually have the opportunity, because of the Austin Utilities bond issue for their new facility many years ago, we actually have the right to charge an additional tax to pay the debt service on their facility. But the utilities has their own user charges set aside to pay that themselves. So council has to tell this county auditor, we're not going to levy that tax because the utilities is taking care of that as part of their payment plan. So I'd open it up for any more questions from the public. Otherwise, after that, I'd need some resolutions or proposals from council if they want to move any or all of these forward individually.
Just one question, Mayor King, do you think the proposed value is fair?
Yes, and I think that because there's a significant history in the city of Austin with populations of cities over 5,000. I believe there's 227 cities in Minnesota that have a population of over 5,000. Austin's consistently been in the bottom 10. So it's hard to find a city of over 5,000 population anywhere in Minnesota with less tax than we have.
That's what I said earlier. Do you know the percentage of homeowners in Austin versus renters?
Versus where?
How many Austin citizens are homeowners versus renters?
I do not have that information. I think last I checked, there was about 9,400 or 9,500 residential units, but the breakdown, owners versus rentals, Craig, you might have that with Holly's.
I'd say it was 60-40 or something.
I was gonna say
wanna say
somewhere
we're
around
in 30%
We've talked
rental.
about that.
Maybe 70-30?
About 70-30, I thought.
Owner to
maybe.
rental?
Yeah, I can check and let you know for sure if you'd like.
Yeah, if anybody's has any questions, you want to just leave us their name and number, we can certainly get back to you on specific questions too. Anything else?
And Tom, if you could back up to your last slide where we hope they're cheering.
Yeah.
It is amazing that there's 6 people out there in the audience and we can make this little cartoon come to life with these folks doing what the slide has them doing.
This is more people than I've ever had, I think, in the last
Absolutely.
20 years.
In a long time.
Yes.
At least 5 more.
Keep your nature center, that's like a mental health
I agree. Yep, you're right on.
academic. Thank you.
Good.
All right, so Tom, you want proposals for
Yeah,
each?
so
why don't
if
you
no
list
other
off?
questions from the citizens, again, these will be officially approved at the December 20th meeting. But tonight, we're going to ask them to forward some recommendations to council. If there's no other questions, I'd ask them to, first one is, do you want to levy the proposed $7,940,000 for 2022? If so, I just need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Second is a proposed budget of $38,949,960 for next year.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Then the last one would be the resolution to cancel the taxes of $1,280,646 that we don't need because utilities has that debt service in their payment structure.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries as well.
Okay, that's it. Just gonna adjourn the meeting. We're good to go.
I kind of thought you were going to have a third, fourth motion that says you cancel the tax on Tom Dankert's home. That's what I
No,
thought.
we decided that'd probably be illegal in most states.
All of that neighborhood, really.
Yeah, the whole neighborhood. Thanks, folks. Thanks for coming. Eric, thanks for reporting. Trooper.
Just write stuff down?
Was I supposed to do that?
Yeah, one
Got
more
his
time.
fantasy lineup set for tomorrow. Uh-oh, what's that?
There was,
I had him bring me today.
Go ahead. Get everything answered, man?
My
7
property,
years,
my
it's a hell of a
property
value.
went up and my taxes went down.
But here's the beauty of it.
This is your number, 4405035?
20,
All right, I'm
25,
gonna have,
like his month is.
I'm gonna have Greg Clark, city administrator, call you. And if he doesn't
Think of you when he, I did think of you when he signed
I
that.
think you called
And
me
that
at
now he's gonna be a twin
959.
of his career, and we will know in 7 years.
Hey, thanks for the write-off.
He's usually pretty